Hello, this is a special announcement of the New Yorker. We are going to talk about Tucker Carlson and his interview with Putin. So because we are going to have a special show of the New Yorker with a Russian flair, we're going to take over the PNN broadcast and play some news from Tucker Carlson. Okay, now let's take a look at YouTube and how they are dissecting the news announcement of Tucker's interview with Putin.
Finally, with 100%.
I want to get to the latest on Russia and ultimately the conflicts that have to do with this Russia-Ukraine war. There's no better person to speak to, in my opinion, than speaking with Alex Gorbachev of the Voice of America's Russian service. And there was an interesting story that we're covering this week. We do want to pull this up for you here, Alex, because President Vladimir Putin granted an interview to U.S. television host Tucker Carlson on Tuesday. The Kremlin said it's going to be his first with an American journalist since before Russia's invasion of Ukraine nearly 2 years ago. A Kremlin spokesperson says that Putin agreed to the Carlson interview because the approach of the former Fox News host differed from the one-sided reporting of the Ukraine conflict by many Western news outlets. That's according to Reuters. For more on this, I just want to first talk with you about this, Alex, because I'm curious about what you're going to be looking for in this interview. It has not been released yet. We don't know what they're going to be speaking about. We have no context about that whatsoever, but I'm curious to know what you're going to be looking out for.
Well, Carlson, Justin.
Let me just interject. We do know about the Smith Monetization Act, where the CIA and the FBI domestically attack the citizens of the United States by propaganda.
That they're gonna release it tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time, so we still have time to talk about it. I would be curious if Carlson asked Putin tough questions. Did he ask him about atrocities committed by the Russian army in Ukraine, like rapes, mutilations, killing of civilians? Did he ask him about Boris Nemtsov's murder? Because the hotel where Carlson is staying, where he recorded the video explaining why he came to Russia to interview Putin, it's located just a few steps away from the place where Russian opposition politician was murdered. So I'm wondering if they're gonna talk about such things. So we'll see about that. What is interesting from an analytical perspective, in this interview, Putin will be addressing American conservatives because they agreed to this interview in the light of upcoming election in the United States, and they wanna address specifically audiences, voters of Republican Party. And they want this interview to be discussed in America. And in order to do that, I'm just purely speculating, but they may come out with something interesting, like, for example, about American journalist Evan Gershkovich, who is now being imprisoned by Putin's regime in Russia because he was doing investigative reporting about the war in Ukraine, and Putin doesn't want any investigative reporting about the war. So if Carlson asks anything about Gershkovich, maybe they will bring up something interesting, which I don't know. I don't want to say the word release, but something about him, something like this. Or what kind of message in general Putin will send to American conservatives in the light of elections, because they may discuss some things which trigger.
He brings a good point, but here's the reality. The United States government actually has targeted citizens and non-citizens because of their particular coverage on a certain subject. Look at how many people have been Arkansas, all right, that are tied to covering, issues with Clinton, all right? Or what about Julian Assange or Snowden, where they were blowing the lid on what was going on that was nefarious in the US government, and now they're considered traitors, that they did treasonous activity, and they, and Snowden had to run to Russia, and Julian Assange is in prison. I'm not even sure which country now. Maybe it's England. I don't know. I don't even know anymore. But the fact is that in the Western world, all right, the UK, in European Union, in the United States, in Canada, you have people that are being persecuted and prosecuted for their journalism or for their whistleblowing on nefarious activities that were going on in their governments. So to spin it as if Russia's the only one that's doing this and that Putin is such a bad guy, well, actually, the US government's pretty bad too. Case in point, look at what they're doing with Snowden and Julian Assange. And then, there are people that have been bumped off, over the years, trying to blow the whistle on certain stuff. See, the reality of the thing is that the deep state wants you to think that Russian is the bad actor. The reality is that, or let me rephrase that Putin is the bad actor. The reality of the situation is this. We have a lot of bad actors within our CIA and the FBI. Not everybody, but many key people within the CIA and the FBI, the NSA, doing surveillance they shouldn't be doing on the American citizen. And when they're caught, they lied to Congress. And when they're caught, they go and become talking heads on CNN. And so it gets even worse. You have the mainstream media, the corporate media, spinning a narrative that's just not true. And this is why Tucker Carlson's actual interview is going to be so important. And that's why they're having such a shit fit.
Putin, for some reason, like LGBT or gender-neutral bathrooms or some other topics. So that's interesting if we're going to see any of that, and what Putin will be sending to, what message Putin will be sending to American voters.
We've been watching the American media react to this week so far, but I got to ask you, how has the Russian media been covering this visit by Tucker?
Extensively, like he's treated in Russia like a rock star. I think when Michael Jackson came to Moscow in 1991 after the Soviet Union collapsed, I think he received pretty much the same reception. So before the interview, out of curiosity, I checked Russian state-run agencies, and they publish some story about Carlson like virtually every 10 minutes. And those are stories like he just left the hotel from the back door. he went to the restaurant. This is what he bought in a grocery store. This is what White House said about him interviewing Putin. So some of this news are like normal. Some of these stories are just ridiculous. So they cover every his virtually his every step.
So there's like a paparazzi kind of thing going on over at in Russia's the news relative to Tucker Carlson's whereabouts. All right. But let's take it further. The US government, aka the CIA, was watching his emails to see who he was going to have interviews with. The US government shouldn't have been doing that. That's the bigger story, is the overreach of the national security state and why the national security state should be taken down, why it needs to be dismantled. That's the bigger story. Now, most people out there that watch this interview with Tucker and Putin aren't going to, most of them aren't going to see the bigger story here. And that is a crazy national security state from the US that needs to be taken down.
Takes in Moscow, and latest what I saw on Telegram that he was seen in Sheremetyevo airport.
When we talk about Putin himself, I'm curious, what would you be curious to ask Putin at this point in the war? Let's put your journalist cap on for a bit here. If you have this opportunity, what would be the questions that you would ask Putin one-on-one?
You know, Austin, Russian media, they even generated a list of questions journalists would like Carlson to ask Putin, for example, from Ukrainian journalist Dmitry Gardon. He wants to ask Putin, how does he sleep at night knowing that so many Ukrainians were murdered as a result of Russian invasion to Ukraine? Or Navalny, who is Russian.
Why not ask why, all the way going back to George Bush Sr., there hasn't been an expansion of NATO going eastward since the fall of the Berlin Wall. And oh, by the way, most of those years, the US taxpayer was paying for NATO. And the other nations weren't fitting their own bill and their portion. And it happened to be Trump who had to force the issue. So it's okay to expand NATO and have the American taxpayer pay for it, but we're going to blame Russia going into Ukraine as the United States has been poking the bear ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Leader being imprisoned in Russia, he wanted to ask Putin, why did he build such a corrupt system in Russia? Because corruption makes his ruling easier, because it's easier to rule the country.
Jeffrey Sachs tried to reboot the currency right after this whole rebuilding of Russia as the Soviet Union collapsed. It was a total failure. Shock therapy blew up their economy. Jeffrey Sachs tried to stabilize their currency through shock therapy and led to the rise of Putin. What it is the United States was trying to corrupt the system in their favor, and what happened was something else emerged that the United States didn't like. So both sides are at fault. Both sides are corrupt. And that shock therapy was a CIA operation.
Just completely corrupt. I would ask Putin personally about atrocities committed by the Russian army in Ukraine, about presidential so-called election in Russia, about journalists who were murdered in Russia, like Anna Politkovskaya, because unfortunately it's me and my colleagues for journalists, we cannot really report from Russia. All Russian independent journalists are exiled, so the only way to speak with Vladimir Putin is when he grants interviews to Western journalists.
How often does Putin do interviews with Western journalists? This is a rare occasion, it seems.
Yeah, not too frequently, so occasionally, time to time. I checked the latest interview. It was before the war in June 2021. I believe he spoke with NBC News. So it's not like every week or every month. He just does it times to times when he wants to address the West or send some signals to the West. And also it's interesting because he doesn't talk with, I don't recall last time when he, besides press conferences, when he talked one-on-one with Russian independent journalists, for example, or journalists who works for anti-Putin media outlet. For him, it's easier to speak with Western journalists because he can mock them, he can make laugh of their accent, emphasize some cultural differences foreign journalists are not aware of, but it will be much harder for him to talk with someone who was suffering from his regime for the last 20 years and who personally knows every step Putin took oppressing Russian journalists and Russian society.
And I'll go even a step further with the Western media question. How often is it that he does a one-on-one with an American media member?
It's hard to
consider that New Year's resolutions are not the answer for you this year. You need real solutions, and therapy can help with that. As a therapist, I see this.
It's hard to do an exact count. I recall his interview with Larry King. I think it was one of the first interviews. I remember a good American journalist, Trudy Rubin, back in, I believe it was 1999, asked at the press conference, who is Mr. Putin? And since then, almost 20 years left, and now I think we know the answer to the question who Mr. Putin is. But he doesn't, I think he is particularly interested in speaking with
who's really Barack Obama. I'm talking about a Manchurian candidate.
American journalists right now due to a certain reason, because of the upcoming presidential election in the United States, and that's why he picked or granted American journalists the permission to interview him.
Last thing I want to touch on before we go here, what are the biggest leads that you're following on the Russia-Ukraine war right now, whether it be on the battleground itself? I also am curious if you think that there's perhaps any relevance of the timing of this interview coming out at the same time as when we are coming up on the anniversary of the war taking place, Alex.
Anniversary of the war, another timing is Putin's election in March. Also presidential election in America, primaries. So timing is this is important timeline in this interview. As we speak now, and I believe even when Carlson interviewed Putin, Russia was bombarding Ukraine. They intensified bombardings. Every day we report, Ukrainian media report, Russian media report on casualties. A lot of civilians are murdered as a result of this war every day. Why they intensified the bombardings now? I think it's related to a few reasons. One of them, they want to be as disruptive as possible because there are division in the US Congress. Right before the interview, senators weren't able to reach the agreement regarding military aid to Ukraine. There are divisions in Ukraine because Zelensky, there are some tensions between Zelensky and Commander-in-Chief Valery Zaluzhny, and they clearly we can see resignation of Ukrainian general in a few days, and also. Yeah, so this is important. This is very important.
The timing is interesting for sure. We do want to thank you, and hopefully we will talk with you soon. We'll be watching for the release of this interview and also, of course, for any major developments in the Ukraine-Russia war. As always, Alex Gorbachev of the Voice of America's Russian Service. We appreciate your time. Take care.
Thank you for having me, Austin.
All right, so that was live now from Fox. Now, let me just give my 2 cents before we go to CNN and their propaganda. All right. Is Putin lily white? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Is there corruption? Absolutely. He's a billionaire. All right. He's a billionaire. That's obvious because he's tied to the oil in Russia. All right. And there's a lot of oligarchs, and that's how they roll over there. Right. But the thing is the United States government is been poking the bear ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall with the expansion of NATO. This is a major problem. And so we have exacerbated the situation on top of failed economic restructuring with shock therapy right after the fall of the Soviet Union. So what it is you have the CIA going on news networks like CNN and MSNBC trying to demonize Putin, right? And anyone that is questioning the US narrative. That's the important piece to this. Not so much the demonization of Putin on mainstream media, but the demonization of individuals questioning the US narrative. And so we're seeing in real time the Smith Modernization Act, where the CIA is using mainstream media for propaganda purposes for domestic and international consumption. The CIA is out of control. The CIA is going to lead us into World War III. That's the bigger thing here. So now what you're going to start seeing is that Tucker, and this is probably a much more complicated kind of situation here. Tucker Carlson's father was tied to the CIA. So is he a black hat? Is he a white hat? Is he just a journalist, meaning Tucker? We don't really know. We don't really know for sure. All right. This may be what's going on with Tucker, may be a CIA operation, but it may be a white hat instead of a black hat. So, or it could be that it's just, he has a big following and he's a journalist, I don't know. No one knows. And that is a key point here. The American people are being played, and we have to be more discerning. The government has overreached its boundaries. Unfortunately, we have a citizenry that's not willing to stand up and say no and mean it. So let's play the propaganda that's on CNN.
Build custom industrial machines in days.
Putin talks to an American friend. The Russian president turning to right-wing conspiracy theorist Tucker Carlson to speak. Carlson's
I can't even get through 30 seconds of CNN without having a shit fit. So Aaron Brown, who, cut her teeth on CNBC in finance, covering, financial news, gets a a cushy seat on CNN, and literally you can't see her think off the cuff at all, and how she just reads that teleprompter like a spoon-fed idiot.
At least momentarily. It is a conversation that the Kremlin is eager for the world to see. Well, why? For that, just listen to the answer from Putin's spokesman fawning over Carlson.
We received many requests for interviews with the president. There is no desire to communicate with such media outlets, and there is hardly any point in it. There is hardly any benefit from it. He has a position that differs from the others.
He, Carlson, has a position that differs from the others. And so, while Putin sees no benefit in sitting down for an interview with a journalist, he does.
Yes, assuming he's not a CIA white hat, all right, because we don't know. His position is different than the other mainstream media outlets, because the other mainstream media outlets are run by the CIA, CNN. Aaron Brown is against your country.
From a conversation with Carlson because of this.
Let me reiterate what I mean by against your country. I'm talking about the United States.
Threat to us. I don't think Putin is comfortable to him. We should take us out of Russia. If we have to choose between Russia and Ukraine, it might be worth asking yourself, since it is getting pretty serious, what is this really about? Why do I hate Putin so much? Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Does he eat dogs? These are fair questions, and the answer to all of them is no. Vladimir Putin didn't do any of that.
Carlson has also given Putin cover when it comes to claims that Russia blew up a crucial dam. Remember that dam in that Russian-controlled area that Putin had taken over in southern Ukraine? Look at this.
What about CNN giving you cover for Clinton's destruction of the servers in these 30,000 plus emails? What about CNN's cover for Biden and Hunter Biden with the laptop and the pay to play stuff that was going on with the Chinese? What about that, CNN? What about the cover you gave for the deep state when concerning exposing nefarious activities that Snowden was trying to tell the public, and what Julian Assange was trying to tell the public? CNN makes money by pushing and towing a line by the CIA. That's a fact.
It's not like Vladimir Putin is anxious to wage war on himself. Oh, but that's where you're wrong, Mr. and Mrs. Cable News consumer. Vladimir Putin is exactly that sort of man, the sort of man who'd shoot himself to death in order to annoy you. We know this from the American media.
The American media, separate from himself. But it's not just defending Putin's invasion of another sovereign country. It's actually also personal slams against Vladimir Zelensky, which, as you'll see here in this case, is a barely veiled call out of Zelensky's Jewish heritage.
Zelensky is corrupt, and he's a cocaine addict. And you know what? We gave the United States government has provided military equipment and financial aid to Ukraine, and they couldn't get the fucking job done. It's time to pull out and stop wasting American taxpayer dollars.
Sweaty and rat-like, a Canadian turned oligarch, a persecutor of Christians, a friend of BlackRock.
Ever since Tucker Carlson landed in Moscow, the state-run media has really said it all. They've treated him like a true celebrity, down to the details about when and how he charged his cell phone. They ran video of Carlson eating at a fast food joint, and the fawning goes both ways.
Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong.
Well, actually, that is wrong. That is not true. We do hear from Putin regularly. We hear his voice. What he says is written about. We play him on this show. In fact, here he is.
Yeah, and then we do an editorial that is approved by the CIA.
Specifically telling all of us exactly what his goals are now.
There will be peace when we achieve our goals. They haven't changed. This is the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, its neutral status.
So there's the goals in his own voice, and he says they haven't changed. The world also knows exactly why Putin invaded Ukraine. He handed out documents, every single Russian soldier, explaining why Ukraine is not a country in the summer before he invaded. And just 3 weeks ago, Putin once again said, quote, the statehood of Ukraine will soon be in question. Putin wants total domination of Ukraine. He's never said that it's anything else. He's very clear. And for real journalists who have traveled to Russia and reported on the facts during this war, they have been jailed. Evan Gershkovich from the Wall Street Journal, he's languishing right now in prison. Vladimir Kara-Murza, he's also right now in a penal colony. Look, everyone wants to hear from Putin more. That's why media outlets like CNN, we request access constantly. Many times requested an interview from Peskov. We hope that Putin will choose to do an interview with a journalist. Out front now, Evgenia Kara-Murza. She is the wife of the jailed Russian journalist and activist Vladimir Kara-Murza, who I just showed you.
Notice the psychological play that they do. Try to demonize Tucker, making it seem as though he's not a journalist, even though he has more journalistic experience than Aaron Brown.
Against Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and was just unexpectedly moved to one of Russia's most brutal penal colonies in Siberia. He is serving a 25-year sentence. And again, I know you and I have spoken many times during this war. Your husband is in prison right now, 25 years. He just moved to another penal colony. And I know you have had to deal with the reality that you might not see him again, because he called the Russian government a quote regime of murderers. Obviously, it is not a country.
What about the demonization of Snowden, Aaron, where he had to flee for his life? What about Julian Assange, where both of them are showing that the national security state is out of control? That is far more important. Don't say much about that, do you, Aaron?
Speech. What is your reaction when you hear the Kremlin promoting this as a real interview with Putin now?
Good evening, Aaron. It's a pleasure to join you again.
Any journalist, even if they are an ex-CNN employee, any journalist other than the mainstream media that has been approved by the CIA, it must not be a real interview with Putin. Must be just done by Bozo the Clown.
Even if I didn't know anything about Mr. Carlson, about his career in journalism and about his quite questionable opinions about certain things, there would be still a lot.
If you have an opinion that is against the mainstream, you must be questionable. See how this is switched around? The things that we're demonizing Putin, we are seeing from our own CIA and our own media, mainstream media. You question about the elections. You question about policies that are being, bills that are being passed by Congress in terms of eroding your civil liberties. If you question about protecting your civil rights that have been enshrined in the Constitution, you must be a racist. You know what? People need to stand up and start fighting for their country. This bullshit's gonna end.
Very loudly in my head. And take, for example, the fact that according to this call, Mr. Carlson is a journalist who is telling the truth. We're talking about the country where people who are actually telling the truth end up behind bars and are being treated as spies, foreign agents, and traitors, like my husband, Vladimir Kara-Murza, who was sentenced to 25 years for so-called treason for consistently denouncing the crimes committed by the Russian army in Ukraine and consistently denouncing.
I'm sure that that situation is bad, that what she's saying, right? And she's truthful. I don't follow it, so I don't know. But the thing is that both sides are doing nefarious things, honey. And guess what? The United States is just as complicit in these types of activities. We don't have free journalism. Not at all. And you know, the thing is it's more pernicious in the United States, meaning that when, you know, there's the shadow banning and, you know, and demonetization of journalists. And if you question the narrative, even if you're, let's say, a scientist or a doctor, and you question the narrative, then they'll try to take away your license, try to demonize you, try to destroy your practice, try to destroy your credibility. So it's more pernicious than what the United States does.
Repression by the Putin regime inside of the country. This is the reality. In 2022 alone, over 200,000 independent online media resources were banned, were blocked by the Russian authorities. And the remaining independent media outlets were closed down and banned, and a countless number of journalists were forced to flee the country fearing persecution. And those who stayed behind basically do their work anonymously because they're under constant threat of arrest or forced exile. This is the country that we're talking about, where truth is being consistently persecuted by the authorities. And of course, the fact that Mr. Carlson is there is, well, it's not only atrocious, but
what about what happened to Roger Stone and that whole FBI raid in the middle of the night? And CNN was given some early warning so they could set up cameras. Don't you find that a little odd? Yeah, we have a real freedom. We really have a real free society. What about what happened to Owen Schroeder, and the whole January 6th bullshit? I'm telling you, the mainstream media in America is run by the CIA.
Putin needs him. You see, the reach of his own propagandists like Margarita Simonyan or Vladimir Solovyov
Russian television.
is limited.
Yeah.
Yes, those are one of the most notorious propagandists ever, but their reach is limited. Now, Mr. Carlson has over 11 million followers on Twitter.
See, now, all right, now we're hitting the pressure point when it comes to the CIA. If you're too big and you don't toe a certain agenda, then we're going to go after you because you have too many followers. If you had the same number of followers and you were telling the public what you want, what we want you to say, then it would be okay. See, what is happening, if you notice with the CIA, is that they are starting to infiltrate pop culture. All right, not just the mainstream news, which is, I guess, an element of pop culture, but you know, let's talk about music and art. They're infiltrating musicians to be able to promote certain agendas to their followers, to their audience. Classic point is what's going on with Tom DeLonge from Blink-182 and this whole UFO bullshit. What's going on with Taylor Swift? What's going on with the football player that she's banging from the Chiefs, whatever his fucking name is, and promoting an agenda? That's where the game is right now. Infiltrate pop culture.
Vladimir Putin needs him to put out that image of reality that he himself promotes through propaganda, that image of reality in which his claims on Ukraine are somehow legitimate and in which he's a good guy who really wants peace. Meanwhile, 4 more civilians were killed in shelling today in Kiev, and people in Russia continue being thrown in jails and tortured there for telling the truth about the nature of this regime.
Okay, I know a week from today is your 20th wedding anniversary.
Now,
Yeah,
let's
can't
use
you
some
believe
emotional
it?
fallacy, Aaron. There's atrocities that the regime Putin is doing, but there are atrocities that were going on with the Bidens, with Obama, with George Bush Jr., the Clintons, I'm sure even with Trump. But I don't think it's as much because his administration was in helter-skelter for most of the time.
Briefly, they allowed one call. On the last call, you had 15 minutes, and you didn't speak to him because you gave those 15 minutes to your 3 children so they could speak to their father. What is the latest you're hearing about how Vladimir is doing? Because I know and it is important that people understand that his health is not good.
Vladimir has been moved to a so-called special regime prison colony, which is the harshest grade in the Russian penitentiary system. He's still in a solitary cell, where the bed is affixed to the wall from morning till night, where he doesn't get any human contact except for when he's still allowed to see his lawyer rarely. It is true the last time the kids were able to speak to him were at the end of last year. Close to New Year's, Vladimir was allowed one 15-minute phone call with the kids, and that was the first phone call in over half a year. We have 3 kids. Divide 15 by 3, that means 5 minutes each. And I was literally standing there with a timer because I couldn't let any of our kids to speak for more than 5 minutes to their father. And of course, yes, I didn't speak to him at all because I didn't want to take that time away from the kids. Now, Vladimir put in a request for a phone call on our 20th wedding anniversary. And a couple of days ago, he received an official denial. That paper said that the reason for the call was not justified enough, that was not on the list of exceptional circumstances which would allow such a call. Unlike, for example, death, they said. So if anyone dies, then maybe Vladimir will be allowed to talk to me. This is the reality of Vladimir Putin's Russia.
Evgenia, thank you very much. It's important. We all hear it. I appreciate it.
What about mainstream media like CNN pushing an agenda where billions and tens of billions and billions and billions of dollars they want to flow into Ukraine? You know, as an American taxpayer for the last, many, many, many years, I'm telling you, America doesn't have the money anymore. All right, now let's take a look at what the Hill has to say. See, now because the EU is upset. See?
Well, it's official. Tucker Carlson is, in fact, interviewing Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, while many suspected as much due to Carlson's recent Moscow appearance, the former Fox News host released a video yesterday highlighting the reasons why he thought it was important to hear what Putin had to say. Let's take a look.
Here's why we're doing it. First, because it's our job. We're in journalism. Our duty is to inform people. 2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed. They have no real idea what's happening in this region, here in Russia or 600 miles away in Ukraine. But they should know. They're paying for much of it in ways they might not fully yet perceive. The war in Ukraine is a human disaster. It's left hundreds of thousands of people dead. an entire generation of young Ukrainians, and has depopulated the largest country in Europe. But the long-term effects are even more profound. This war has utterly reshaped the global military and trade alliances, and the sanctions that followed have as well. And in total, they have upended the world economy.
Following Carlson's announcement video, many took to X to praise him for conducting the interview. Presidential hopeful RFK Jr. posted, "Mainstream media journalists have interviewed Putin many times before. The only difference now is that they can't control the narrative. Zelensky has been given numerous primetime interviews. Osama bin Laden has been interviewed before. We have a right to hear from everyone, no matter how you feel personally about them." Former GOP candidate for president Vivek Ramaswamy wrote, "Carlson is a real journalist, actual intellectual curiosity."
But not everyone was so gung-ho on Carlson's interview. CNN's Christiane Amanpour responded to accusations leveled by Carlson that he was the only Western journalist willing to talk with Putin by writing, "Does Tucker really think we journalists haven't been trying to interview President Putin every day since his full-scale invasion of Ukraine? It's absurd. We'll continue to ask for an interview, just as we have for years now." Amanpour seemed to be vindicated by the community notes under Carlson's video, which added a statement by Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov that, quote, "Mr. Carlson is not correct. In fact, there's no way you can know this. We received numerous requests for interviews with the president."
Later on in his announcement video, Carlson alleges that the Biden administration hacked into Carlson and his company's phones to get text messages and leak them to mainstream outlets to try and derail the interview. Let's take a look.
Right.
Almost 3 years ago, the Biden administration.
This is a great point. All right. The mainstream media is saying we're trying to get Putin. And so they're butthurt because Tucker Carlson was able to do it. All right. But the reality of the situation is that the mainstream media wanted to be able to do the editing and do the questioning where it would demonize. So Putin was smart enough to say, I don't want to do that. All right. Just look at what Megyn Kelly was trying to do to Alex Jones. And they were trying, and if you watch the interview that she did a few years ago, he was moving in the seat erratically. So they couldn't do the editing to kind of misrepresent him, which was a smart move by Alex Jones. All right. But you got to remember, that was when Megyn was kicked out of Fox and she was trying to boot up her, kind of show of doing special interviews with people. All right. A few years ago. Maybe this was 4 years ago. I lost track of time now. All right. That's how these people work, though. You can't trust them. You can't trust them. They want to demonize you. I had a little bit of that, with two different news organizations. One was CCTV, when this whole thing about the crisis in 2020 and being attacked by Harvard Crimson, trying to demonize me because of what I was saying, which came out to be 100% true. If you don't toe a certain narrative, they'll go after you. So these journalists are butthurt that Tucker was able to get the interview, and the deep state is upset because they're not, quote, controlling him, assuming he's not a white hat.
On our text messages and then leak the contents to their servants in the news media. They did this in order to stop a Putin interview that we were planning. Last month, we're pretty certain they did exactly the same thing once again, but this time we came to Moscow anyway.
Yeah, look, I think there are some true points that are being made here. Of course, it's true that Zelensky has gotten a lot of softball interviews that the mainstream press should be critical of. Of course, it's true that people who are, very much publicly reviled, like Osama bin Laden and Putin, have done mainstream news interviews, and that this doesn't have to be any different. It's also true that I think that
this is a gigantic geopolitical play in the European theater, and the deep state doesn't want the American public to actually start asking questions about the validity of what the mainstream media has been saying for the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years about Ukraine. This thing's going all the way back to 2014, 10 years ago.
Tucker Carlson is overstating his case somewhat by saying that no one else has ever tried to interview Putin. He's the one that's been given access that others apparently have not been given access. And that does raise some questions about why it is that he's being permitted this interview and if he's going to take this opportunity to do a real substantive interview. And we can only judge that after we see the interview itself.
Yes, and there is a history, by the way, by mainstream respected journalists of doing a little bit of, frankly, some fluff reporting in order to land the big interview with the controversial figure and then hitting them with some hard questions. That is something that is an established practice. So don't judge what's taken place yet. Judge the actual quality of the interview. I hope Tucker asked about the Wall Street Journal reporter who has been detained absolutely illegally and unfairly. I hope he asks about the humanitarian cost for Ukraine and for Russia of this war and what it will take to get Putin to meet with Zelensky or meet with intermediaries in order to bring a halt to this awful, unconscionable war, and many other questions about the regime and what's going on in Russia.
Yeah, I agree. It is interesting, these accusations now that his phone is being tapped and that messages are being leaked in order to stop the interview. Do you understand what that argument is or how would be well tailored to actually stopping the interview from happening?
So I remember this accusation being levied that the messages were leaked in order to, I think it was in order to put pressure on Tucker's employer at the time to stop this interview. I don't know what's going on.
Remember, he was working for Fox. So was there some sort of disagreement with Fox and Tucker and how he wanted to do journalism? I mean, because don't think that Fox is on your side. They're not.
Now seeing breaking news from Brian Krasenstein, one of the high-profile account on X, saying that the European Union is said to be seeking sanctions and a travel ban against Tucker for doing the interview. So to stop him from traveling throughout the European Union, which frankly does sound like the exact sort of action the European Union would take. This very, at times, illiberal alliance. Obviously, their tech policies have become very in favor of due process and civil liberties violations on COVID subjects, on some of the Israel-Palestine subjects. So that would not surprise me at all if they're taking the position that a journalist can't interview Vladimir Putin. Obviously, within Ukraine, we've covered how Zelensky himself has taken steps to eliminate the free press in the country.
Actually, died in custody.
There was just, I might talk about it. I might do it right.
So the Russians going to come out. The mainstream media, all they care about is to demonize Putin and put Zelensky on a pedestal. So more money flows from Congress to the war effort.
I am so sick and tired of constant war. My whole life has been nothing but war in the news. The tail end of the Vietnam era, the terrorist activities that were going on in the 80s and the early 90s, the Cold War, then Desert Storm and Desert Shield, right? 9/11. I mean, it's just never ending. We're always on a war footing. Brought to you by Lockheed and Martin and the CIA. Don't you find it so odd, that Balamos woman, whatever her name was, that was selling the machine for, to diagnose cancer, and she fraudulently sold a product to investors, and she was convicted of this, whatever her name is. How she had this deep voice trying to show some sort of authority, which was all fake, right? And she wore all black like she was the female version of Steve Jobs. So they were putting her up on stage to promote a product that doesn't work. Don't you find that very similar to what is going on with Zelensky? Wear a fucking suit, Zelensky. You're a head of state of your country. Instead, he's wearing jogging pants and some sort of military t-shirt in almost every interview. It just has this kind of like fake it until you make it California thing going on with Zelensky. CIA operation.
For tomorrow, I don't know, but well, I'll mention it briefly if I don't end up mentioning it again. There was recently reporting that an actor who had been cast, a Russian actor who had been cast in the third season of White Lotus. We're both fans of that show, I think. The Ukrainian government put pressure on HBO to fire him, and they did so ostensibly for like pro-Russian statements he'd made. You can't find a single pro-Russian statement this person. It's just banal. The violence is bad, and I hope
If you don't push the narrative, don't push the narrative where you're anti-Russian, then you must be a bad American citizen. You don't eat apple pie. You don't fly the American flag in front of your house. You don't say the Pledge of Allegiance. You don't watch American football. If you say something positive about Russia. That's the mentality that's going on. You think, I'm speaking in hyperbole, but you get the point. I'm not far off the mark with even speaking in hyperbole. This whole anti-American versus, anti-Russian rhetoric is so passé now. This whole Cold War bullshit.
He'd gotten some kind of award from the Russian government years ago, but he hasn't said anything that they could find. The New York Times did a whole story on it. They couldn't find anything he'd said that was pro-Russian or pro the Russian war, and it's another one of those Russian cancel culture stories.
Yeah, you're completely right about the tone, the tenor of speech rights in Europe being really, really cold. There was a story in The Intercept earlier this week about German media giant Axel Springer saying that "From the River to the Sea" is a verboten statement. Obviously in the context of Palestinians, and then running ads in their own paper from Israel that uses that exact phrase, "from the river to the sea." And so there's there was, I think especially in Germany, because of the history of the Holocaust, a real shutdown on pro-Palestinian speech in particular. But you're seeing that is enabled by this broader culture where there just isn't the same kind of protection for First Amendment protected activities. And I think you're right to point out how that seems to be affecting journalists who are advocating both for Palestinian interests and who want to do even a basic interview with the president of Russia. I did want to ask also what you described earlier as, well, sometimes you do a fluff interview to get a more substantive interview. I mean, another word for that is access journalism, and that gets the obvious critique. I remember we covered a interview between Kamala Harris and Katie Couric recently, where after a tough line of questions from Katie Couric, Katie says, "Well, now we're going to go talk about some more positive things to campaign," and Kamala Harris goes, "Good." and it did kind of give the impression that she said, "Look, you gotta have to put up with me for these few minutes of tough questions, and then we can move on to easier things." That's not exactly the same thing as access journalism, but she would be concerned if that's the case, if the only reason that Tucker Carlson might have been able to get Putin in front of the camera where Christiana Amanpour cannot is because there is some kind of a guarantee that he's not going to go there.
Yeah, I mean, if he can't go there at all, then it's obviously not worth doing. If there are so many,
no one has seen it, to my knowledge, until later tonight. So we'll know. All right, and I'll do a show on it. And my take from previous shows that he has done on Fox. All right, because I haven't seen him really that much with his new TCN channel, all right? But the shows that he did on Fox, they were superficial when it came to the crisis in 2020 and all the things that I have been saying about it, especially when he interviewed certain people that were trying to blow the whistle on GOF. He just looked like a deer in the headlights. He had that dumb, constipated deer in the headlight look. So we'll see, you know. But the thing here is, the bigger issue is that the more that thinking individuals have access to both sides of the story to be able to synthesize their own conclusion, the deep state is going to be worried. And they're going to try to control the narrative. They control the narrative many different ways. Threaten the companies that they work for, threaten the actual journalist. Start shadow banning on, you know, these social platforms like X or Facebook or TikTok. You get too big and they'll squash you. Look at, you know, these people that were trying to blow the whistle on what was happening during the crisis in 2020 and how they were demonized. It's a real problem. But the American people didn't actually stand up and actually fight for their constitutional freedoms. They're still sitting on the couch, eating their Doritos and watching their football. And that's why we're having the problem we have. You have to be an engaged citizen, not just engaged, but informed. So you get informed and you get active. Knowledge, just for the sake of knowledge, means nothing. Just reacting to things is problematic. You have to have knowledge and react to the knowledge.
Conditions put on it. I mean, you know, interviewing people is difficult. We do it sometimes. Everybody has different, journalists have all sorts of different styles when it comes to it. Sometimes you want to just really go after the person and burn bridges and make it so that there's no way this person would ever consent to an interview with you again. Sometimes you hope that they'll come on again on your show, they'll talk to you again in the future. So you want to, you know, balance it out in some way so that you can be in a position to interview that person again. And it's all about trade-offs, and it is a difficult thing to navigate, and some journalists do it better than others. You know, we try our best. I know when we had Fauci on, Batya and I interviewed him a couple years ago. A lot of people thought it was not harsh enough, given how much we had condemned him and criticized him. But I wanted the opportunity to maybe interview him again. I think we actually asked him tougher questions than he almost ever got asked in any sort of mainstream or cable news, corporate news context. And I'm very proud that we did that, even if it wasn't, you know, he logged off in fury and anger, cut the interview short. That was, I decided, not going to be ultimately productive. But people can disagree.
Yeah. Well, let's know what you think and stick around, please, because we have more Rising for you coming up shortly.
All right, so let's play Pete, what is called.
Do you like minting money? Well, the lithium business is for you. The lithium margins right now are practically software margins. We're seeing cases where the spot lithium price.
Tucker Carlson being spotted in Moscow sparks frenzy speculation. This is news, okay? Dramatic. So former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, recent presence in Moscow, where he was seen attending the Bolshoi Theater on February 1st, has ignited speculation about the purpose of his visit, particularly whether he aims to interview Russian Vladimir Putin. During his trip, Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene expressed excitement about the prospect of Tucker Carlson interview with Putin, emphasizing the importance of individuals like Carlson in upholding a free press. Democrats and their propagandists and the media are spasming at the prospect of Tucker Carlson interviewing Putin against. This is a Newsweek story. We have a free press in this country, and it's people like Tucker Carlson who we depend on to speak the truth. In response to these speculations, Kremlin press secretary Dmitry Peskov referred to Carlson's prior interview attempt with Putin and stated, "We'll have to wait and see whether such an interview materializes." Okay, So before I give my thoughts on this, Vinny, what are your thoughts about this?
I think what he's doing is amazing. I think in the same sense of Trump, when Trump was like, for years, when he was like, what is wrong with trying to communicate with these people? How are you going to ignore an enemy? Why not sit down, talk to them, find out what's on their mind? I think Tucker going there is
Go even
amazing
one
to
step
have.
further. Learn about history, dude. We're gonna need a two-front war, just like we had a two-front war against the Nazis during World War II. We're gonna need a two-front war in World War III. So partnering with Russia was actually a smart idea to get rid of the problem that we have with China.
To see where he's at, but notice how the left is losing their mind back because they can't make him look like he's a human being. Because everything from the Putin price hike to the Putin war, everything has to be negative, negative, negative. Don't talk because guess what? If you make him into a normal civil person, then it's harder to call him an enemy on the news and try to start a war with him. That's what it is.
Tom, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think Tucker's trying to be a part of the media. We've had things where, you know, a while back when I was a young guy, I saw Barbara Walters interview Fidel Castro.
Weird.
And that was back when, hey, it's a free press going to a foreign country, trying to interview a controversial world dictator to see what he had to say. Is there a humanness under that? Is there an opening there? Is there some...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was some sort of debriefing right when she came back to the United States by the CIA.
Is that the one? Look at that. Look at young.
Wow. Yeah, this Barbara Walters went and interviewed Fidel Castro. So why is it so freaking crazy and that the press is losing its mind that Tucker Carlson wants to follow in the footsteps of Barbara Walters? You know, when you read about her bio, she was a journalist from the Walter Cronkite era. She ended her life a little bit, well, now what we would call maybe a little woke, but she was a journalist. So why is it so crazy that Tucker Carlson goes to interview Vladimir Putin to see what he's going to say and to see if there's something there? It doesn't mean that he's being buddies with him and taking him quail hunting that Tucker likes to do in North Carolina. It means he's over there to talk to him. Why is that so bad?
Adam.
Look, I think people want to see this interview.
Of
We've
course.
had this conversation of, you know, who's on your top 5, top 10 list of people you'd love to speak to. Putin is on that list. I don't understand the obsession, especially on the far right fringe that are pro-Putin people. There's definitely talk of that. I don't think Tucker is pro-Putin. I just don't think he is pro the war in Ukraine. The most ironic thing to me, though, is this. We're talking about this free press conversation. When there's no free press in Russia, Russia is ranked 148th out of 180 countries, according to the Reporters Without Borders.
We don't have a free press in the United States because of the shadow banning. The real journalism is actually this whole independent thing that's going on.
Press Freedom Index. The beautiful thing about America is we have a First Amendment. Freedom of the press, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom to gather, everything we understand about that. So it's just interesting that the bedrock of freedom of press, America, Tucker Carlson, arguably the biggest reporter in the world right now, is going to speak to the dictator known as Vladimir Putin, potentially.
Yeah, and by the way, CNN showed they're like, yeah, and he is in Kremlin where he's getting a free battery charge without having to worry about the Wi-Fi with being spied on. And, you know, obviously the news is saying this, and CNN is making fun of the fact that you trust the Wi-Fi in Russia. I don't know if I trust the Wi-Fi in Russia. I don't know if I'm...
But the thing is, the U.S. government shouldn't have been spying on Tucker, period.
You know, when you go to places like this, you have to know, you don't necessarily know what they're going to be doing to get access to you. You have to assume 100%, especially if your name is Tucker Carlson. They're probably, you have to use a fresh laptop. You have to go with a fresh computer. That's nothing else is in there. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
You have to be prepared. You have to think like a, you know, a person that would be involved in some kind of secret intelligence to see how they would be thinking. You have to, and I'm sure him being who he is and his camps filled with some sharp guys that, you know, we've spoken to a couple of them. I'm sure they're thinking that way. But at the same time, competition is always intimidated by a guy that's willing to get on a plane and fly to Russia to go interview somebody that everybody else is so afraid of interviewing, or you don't want to talk to because it's opposing ideas. Look, for me, I have my business plan here. This is very sacred. This is only mine, and nobody gets to read this. This is only for me, and it fires me up. When I write my business plan like this and I laminate it, it starts off with a letter to myself, and I got a list of guys that I'd like to do certain things with.
You know what I've noticed, all right? You know, and I'm highly educated, right? Way too educated. Over time, I think that people are overbooking their calendar, over setting goals, and not having enough tolerance to just think and let things emerge. Now, that seems to be antithetical to business school, and I went to business school. I have an MBA, right? But the thing is that sometimes don't overthink it. Simplify your business. Get to the core. You don't have to get too crazy. Yes, you have to do some budgets, and you have to have some goals, and you have to, set those goals and have some metrics to see if you're reaching those goals. So you have some sort of budgetary goal and some sort of forecast that, are you meeting it? Are you exceeding it? Are you underperforming? But don't get too crazy about it. Simplify. I think people that are running businesses these days, they over budget, they overcomplicate stuff. And it can be just tone it down in terms of the complexity. Don't overdo it. It sounds like this guy's overdoing it. It doesn't mean on the other side of the spectrum not to, have budgets, not to have goals, right? But there is this, I'm noticing that people are overdoing it these days because they have some knowledge about business, or maybe they got an MBA or whatever, and they just overdo it. What's your 5-year plan? What's your cash flows for that? And what's going to be, what's your margins? And I think with Steve Jobs, when he came to, the idea of products, he basically say, make a product that people want to buy, and all of the financial things will just work itself. I think that's very true. Focus on the product. Focus on the service.
Who's on my list of people I want to talk to this year? Maduro. Maduro's not a right-wing guy. I don't want to talk to Maduro. I want to talk to certain people who are hardcore socialists. I have certain people on here that I like to talk to. A lot of people would say, you would talk to him? You would talk to her? Yes, I'm curious, okay? We just did a podcast with Bill Maher. I enjoy talking to him. I wish it went a different direction, but I enjoy talking to the guy because it's to see why does this person think the way he does. I'm excited to see what he does in the interview. And odds-wise, do you guys have any odds on what you think whether the interview is taking place or not based on how the media from Russia answer? What do you think the percentage is that's actually he's there to interview Putin? What is the percentage?
I think 90%. I think 90%.
Tom, what do you say?
Yeah, I'm above 85%. We'll do like Price is Right.
I'm above 85%, Bob.
I think it's highly likely. That's why he's there. So, yeah.
What are you at? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Rob, you think it's going to be happening?
I'm 50-50. It's either Putin or Snowden.
It's either Putin or Snowden.
Yeah, because Snowden's hiding out in Russia. Yeah. But either interview would be fantastic.
Well, how about this?
Do both of them at the same time.
Maybe both.
Did an interview with
Megyn Kelly.
A while ago, yeah.
Megyn Kelly, what year was that?
6 years ago, 5 years ago.
So it's not.
And when she first went to NBC is when it got done. So whatever that time.
And he tried that. So Tucker tried to have an interview with Putin before, but
that's right. That's right. So she left Fox, and then she was doing these shows, and she was interviewing Putin and Alex Jones. That's right. 5 years ago.
America was spying on him, right?
According to Tucker, the NSA hacked his signal messages after he was planning a trip to Russia to interview Putin. So the NSA started spying on Tucker when they found out he was going to go.
I believe it. That's what was 100%.
This was when he worked for Fox News. He mentioned this when he did the interview with the Nelk boys after.
And the NSA shouldn't be doing that. Period. And why Why are they building a gigantic server in the middle of the desert? For the NSA, for all this data collection, while the American taxpayers are paying for it. Why? The government's out of control. They don't need to know everything. Well, we gotta prevent terrorism. You can't prevent terrorism. Live free or die. It's really simple.
I fully believe it.
So, Mike, can I ask you a question?
If I was doing that going over there, I would start on my Signal account. Did you get the coke from Hunter? I'd be populating my Signal account with all these potential messages.
What admits the NSA hacked into the Signal messages? By the way, that means even Signal can get hacked into.
1000%, of course. What? Well, my question.
Everything's got a back door.
Why do you think? I mean, besides the obvious, why do you think the left is so anti? Do not go speak with this guy. Why do they hate and they're trying to stop him from going over there?
Why do they hate him speaking?
Yeah. Why doesn't CNN, MSNBC, mainstream media?
They hate it because the narrative that's approved is expansion of NATO and the destruction of of Russia. That's the narrative. You listen to any policy wonk in international affairs that's coming from, let's say, the Kennedy School at Harvard, or some sort of international affairs program from Tufts, they are all saying the same thing. You listen to CISF, or is it CIS, and some of these other think tanks, like the Hoover Institute and all these think tanks, right? The Trilateral Commission and the CFR, they're all saying the same thing. And they're all leading us right into World War III. And Tucker is not pushing, it seems, that narrative.
Biden, everybody does not want him to talk.
They want to control the narrative.
Well, no. Think about it from this standpoint. Obama went and hung out with who was he with in Cuba? Was it Chavez that he went to a baseball game with?
I know you went to with Fidel Castro's brother, his brother.
So he went to
he went to Trudeau's uncle. Go ahead.
Yes. So he went to a baseball game with them, and the right said, you know, what kind of a situation is this? Why would you go have a conversation with them? And what is this all about? And
Yeah.
The difference is one is having a conversation. The other one is going to a game and being entertained by a game. Now, if you ask me, I don't have any problem with him doing this. But if he also does it with the other side, I don't have any problem doing that.
Yeah.
Like for me, I like the fact that Trump met with Putin. I like the fact.
I am so tired of dumb people doing podcasts, right? They may have a big channel, but that doesn't mean they're smart, all right? Isn't it a common theme to go pheasant shooting or target shooting with people to talk about policy or some sort of perhaps new change in the winds of international affairs? You go and do an activity. You don't go sit in a conference room. You go and do an activity. Now, the more well-heeled individuals will be doing pheasant shooting or fox hunting or some sort of hunting thing, all right? The less well-heeled individual is going to be going, you know, that's a player, you know, let's say a power broker is going to go to a football game or to some sort of sports where you're going to sit down, you may have, you know, a suite and you know, talk your business. But those are the less well-heeled, and they're not the puppet masters. They're in between. They're intermediaries. The ones that are well-heeled, they have a shotgun and they shoot birds.
Trump met with Xi. I like the fact that Trump met with Kim. I like the fact that Trump met with anybody and everybody. I like the fact that a president's willing to sit down with any of these guys to keep them close and talk to them. I like diplomacy. I like sitting there so you know who I am face to face. You see me kneecap to kneecap, to walk away saying, okay, at least this guy's a guy that I can sit down and have a conversation with. I don't mind any of that stuff taking place. But I'm wearing a Future Looks Bright shirt, the purple and gold, the one that was a limited one that we did last week. And I'm wearing a purple and gold, what do you call it? These heads, right? I'm wearing these. I think we have like 30 of these left.
So instead of PBD doing his advertisements, this is PNN, special guest by the Russian. And I'm going to be doing a commercial because DrPaulCottrell is better. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver gel and stop buying fucking baseball hats and t-shirts. Because a baseball hat and t-shirt isn't going to save your life. A baseball hat and t-shirt isn't going to improve your health. So go to the store, get the structural nano silver gel, put it on your hands. It will neutralize pathogens for 5 hours. You can put it around your mouth, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils, around your eyes, around your ears. It'll neutralize pathogens. You can put it on your skin for skincare. It'll help with acne. I'm pretty sure that baseball cap isn't going to help with acne. I'm real positive about that. Go to my store and get the structural nano silver toothpaste. Why? Because this toothpaste is way better than anything that Alex Jones sells. It'll help to whiten your teeth, freshen your breath. Because it has structural nano silver, it will neutralize pathogens, reduce that gingivitis and the plaque buildup, because bacteria is what's building up your plaque. And oh, by the way, when you're neutralizing the pathogens, you're reducing cardiovascular disease. Bad oral hygiene will increase cardiovascular disease. Bad oral hygiene will increase valvular disease for your heart. Get the structural nano silver and improve your cardiovascular system. I'm pretty sure that that baseball cap that he's selling on BPD isn't helping with cardiovascular disease. But what do I know? Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get honey lemon structural nano silver drops. This will soothe your throat. If it's irritated, it'll also neutralize pathogens because of the structural nano silver. We're getting out of the cold season, but we're going to be moving into the spring season in the United States, and there's going to be pollen, and people may have some allergies. So you're going to have, some people may have irritation in their throat. Go to the store and get the lozenges and the drops. This one is honey and lemon. It's in 100 count. I also have green apple lozenges in a 20 count, which are bigger than the drops. Blueberry drops, structural nano silver blueberry drops in 100 count. I have elderberry zinc silver lozenges in a 21 count, so you get one free lozenge. And I have Manuka honey silver lozenges in a 21 count. So please go to my store and get the structural nano silver products that I offer, because they actually do something that's beneficial for your body, not a fucking baseball cap.
Kobe, yes. And I'm wearing these, and everyone's, future looks bright, future looks bright, future looks bright. Conversations, right, that are being started. Why is that? Because people don't believe the future looks bright today. It scares the crap out of them when they see somebody say future looks bright. So this is what we're doing today. For anybody that purchases, any purchase you make today on the store with a minimum of a hat, you have to buy a hat. Obviously, if you do an order over $70, shipping is on us. But anything you order with the hat that says future looks bright, we have a lot of different colors, the blacks, the military, the white, the red.
Don't wear something that's the future's bright. Take control of your life by getting informed, by improving your health. That's how you have a better outlook on life. If you're chronically sick, how are you going to have a better outlook on life? A baseball cap isn't going to change that. But eating properly, having proper exercise, proper balancing, training your brain, learn something new, read and write, talk to people in the real world, proper supplementation, proper sleep. These are things that are going to improve your life. Not a baseball cap that says have a nice day with a smiley face. Stupid.
Pick and choose. You can even do these, but any orders you make today, we're gonna do a raffle, okay? And on the Thursday podcast, we're gonna announce 2 winners that are gonna get a ticket to go to the Vault Conference. It's a $750 ticket to go to the Vault Conference on the house, because we want you to spend 3 days with us in Palm Beach at the Vault Convention Center. We'll be at the Palm Beach Convention Center to make 2025 the beginning of the greatest years of your life. And when you're around the Vaitian audience, they're just like you. If you
So I'm going to go to Sky News here.
I want to
What
leave my
Megyn
loved
Kelly has to
ones
say.
a legacy to be proud of. Phoenix Capital Group's high yield bonds allow you to choose the investment strategy.
So for the people that don't know, I have met Megyn Kelly. All right. Her husband is the writer. He just wrote a book. If you don't believe me, just Google it. He wrote a book about diesel. He's the inventor of the diesel engine and the mystery of the diesel murder. Or it seemed like he was murdered. He died, and there's some sort of conspiracy on how the inventor of diesel died. So he wrote a book, about his theory on it. Okay. And so he did a lecture over at the Harvard Club. So I saw the lecture at the Harvard Club. It was actually on the celebration of the birthday of Sherlock Holmes. All right. So the Harvard Club has has this annual event where a guest speaker comes in and they talk about, something about either a mystery or, so in this case, it was a book that's was recently released. So her husband wrote this book about Diesel's death. All right. It was on a ship, and, and he happens to have some sort of hobby about building marine vessels. So, I guess this is part of the reason why he decided to write the book. So Megyn comes to the Harvard Club too, right? I'm lukewarm in terms of her personality. I think there are some problems with her personality, that it's a little fake, right? But so I was in an exclusive environment with Megyn Kelly, and that was because her husband was doing the lecture for his book. Now, let's see what she has to say, because I haven't seen this video about her defending Tucker. But you got to remember, she's kind of a washed up journalist because of her personality and how she was trying to clip Trump during the debate between Trump and Hillary Clinton, if you don't remember about that.
I've noticed that, other people in the media are going nuts because Tucker Carlson is interviewing Putin. And I was thinking, who's somebody else who's interviewed Putin? Oh, that's right, my mate Megyn. But what I also find quite bizarre here.
That's another thing about her. It's always about her. That was the thing that I noticed at the Harvard Club. We all had to wait until she walked into the room. Literally, like she was the Queen of fucking England.
A little bit of like the old school rules about, remember the Time Person of the Year? It wasn't about whether they were a good guy or a bad guy. It was whether they were impactful, right? So therefore, whether they're good guys or bad guys, you still want to sit down and talk to them. What happens in the interview? Okay, we'll all wait and watch and make our own decision. But the freak out at somebody even going to Moscow to interview him, I find quite odd, Megyn.
It's all about her.
So sick of this nonsense. I mean, back in my day,
back in your day,
we were allowed to interview the bad guys. It wasn't a shock to see a journalist across from a bad guy. I watched Mike Wallace in what was called Murderer's Row on 60 Minutes because they were all so tough. Interview the Ayatollah of Iran. I watched him interview the head of the KKK wearing a white hood. The guy was in the hood in the interview.
My understanding is Megyn is around my age. All right, so she's in her 50s. All right, she looks pretty good for being a 50-year-old. All right, so so she's around my age. But even when she dressed at the Harvard Club, it was with kind of with its skirt, and it was a little provocative. You know, it didn't have class. If you look at what she wears on her show, on her podcast, or even during this interview, it doesn't have a classy look. It has a provocative look. And why do you have to be provocative? Because perhaps what's coming out of your fucking mouth is a bunch of bullshit.
Diane Sawyer, another person I greatly admire, interviewed Jeffrey Dahmer, who murdered people and then ate them. That was not a bridge too far for Americans to see as an interview. Charles Manson, one of the most notorious murderers in American history. She sat down across from him. I don't know when the new rule got handed down that we only get to interview the good guys. It's very wacky. I went through this myself.
Very
I interviewed
wacky.
Alex Jones. Yes, now Tucker's going to go through it with Putin.
Is she an
I haven't seen the
airhead?
interview. I support his right and duty as a journalist to do it. If he's not tough, if he doesn't ask him tough questions, he'll be excoriated, rightfully so. That's a duty he has. He shouldn't drop that ball. But let's just wait to see what the interview looks and sounds like before we dismiss it as partisan hackery or some sort of an ethical breach or some betrayal of the country.
But also, you know, and look, the actions of the government is always different than the actions of
Asking questions to the quote enemy isn't treasonous. It's actually informing the public to understand both sides of the story. And this is the problem that we have. The deep state wants the American public to have a certain narrative. And they got you almost. They almost got you. Most people watch mainstream news. Most people watch football. Most people are listening to Taylor Swift. And now the CIA's got
people. But the idea that even going there is some sort of, you know, act of helping the enemy. You know, I spent some time in a YouTube deep dive the other day where I was having a look at some old Billy Joel stuff. And remember when the culture sort of in the late 80s, early 90s was, you know, American invited to Moscow and shaking the hands of normal people and they're just like us. That seems to be where we were. Instead, now it's, you know, the entire country and its citizenry are all kooky and crazy and evil.
Well, you're talking about the 1980s, depending on, you know, this is the very beginnings of cable news. All right. So most people didn't have cable. You know, cable didn't come to our neighborhood until like, I want to say 84. So if it's early, if it's early 80s, then you didn't even have cable. But even back then, you know, it's the early days of cable and you didn't really have cable news, right? Right. That was kind of a more later in the 80s, not in the mid 80s. So, you know, the big thing was like HBO, right? And you would have your local news and your, you know, your mainstream news, which was ABC, NBC, CBS, right? So that was most of the 80s for most people in the United States. So you had this Cold War thing that was starting to thaw out and that people were just starting to get more information, you know, domestically and internationally. And CNN was probably spearheading that whole thing. And that early CNN was like pretty cool, right? Now CNN is a propagandist shithole.
Not letting the bloke off the hook. You went tough on him, and obviously he is the aggressor when it comes to Ukraine, no question. But this sort of total othering of everyone in the joint seems very, it's very weird. But surprise, surprise, sort of, you know, the media. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
So I was going to say, America's sweetheart, Goldie Hawn, she went over there with Kurt Russell and had an audience at the Kremlin. I mean, it used to be just as you say. And by the way, now having been to Moscow and to St. Petersburg and to Kaliningrad, personally, I can tell you the Russian people are absolutely lovely and they love America and they love Americans. They would love to come over here and visit. They love when we go over there. They love to show off their cities. They're so grateful when we show any interest in them.
This is why I have been saying for 4 years, it's better to align with the Russians because there's a common Western culture. And that as the war starts to ramp up in Asia against China, you're going to need Russia for the Northern Front. It was stupid to demonize Russia. Very stupid. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Did I say stupid enough? Stupid.
Big America haters. It's not North Korea. You know, it's Russia is actually feels very European in places.
It is.
St. Petersburg, which is really like, it looks like Venice. If you've never been, it's like Venice. It's got a bunch of canals. It's got beautiful waters. It's just absolutely lovely. St. Petersburg and the castle, all the stuff. So
Venice smells. Don't go to Venice.
Point is, you can hate the government, not hate the people. And that's the way through this, because our kids are going to have to live with Russia in this world. And there's no point in starting and continuing another Cold War. That's not to say that they shouldn't be held to account, the government, for what they've done. And yes, they support Vladimir Putin. They love a strong man. That's how Russians are. And Mother Russia's really been, you know, she's taken it on the chin these past several decades. And they see a man who's standing up for Russia. And it's not uniform, but as a whole, they like it. Now, on the Tucker front, the part of the reason they're skeptical of Tucker is he has not been hard on Russia in his coverage of this conflict. He's been, if anything, defensive of them. And so I think people are expecting him to do a very flattering.
I think that it wasn't so much that Tucker is defensive of Putin. It's more that he is anti-war in Ukraine. That's the issue. Now, who benefits from a war in Ukraine? Well, NATO gets to expand. Seems like there's a lot of corruption between the Democratic Party and the Ukrainian government. There is this, you know, flowing of money. It seems like there's some pay-to-play type stuff that's going on. There's a lot of corruption with Zelensky's regime. And then there's the money that gets to flow to the industrial complex, military industrial complex in the United States for weapons. So there are players that are benefiting from a war in Ukraine, not peace in Ukraine. Because war is business. And business is good under the Biden administration.
Softball interview that will further the narrative that people feel they've heard from Tucker, who's very defensive of Russia and very hard on Ukraine. And so they're anticipating hating it. Now, okay, that may be a problem with the interview. It may not be. Let's wait to see. Crazy thought. Let's wait to see how he does. And maybe if he asks him some tough questions, it'll be a real opportunity for us to learn something about. I'm going to be honest. The whole thing will be propaganda on Putin's part. But so I'm not going to say what he's actually thinking, but what he wants us to think, which is also interesting.
I'm still waiting for Megyn Kelly to release something that Epstein was going to say, you know, from the dead. To my knowledge, that hasn't been released. She is an airhead, blonde airhead. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, because when you listen to people like Megyn Kelly, you might get problems with your heart. So to control your lipid profile and reduce cardiovascular disease, go to my store and get the omega-3. It'll bring down your LDL. The whole idea to lower your chances of cardiovascular disease and improve your heart and your heart health is to bring up your HDL, bring down your LDL, bring down your triglycerides, bring down your cholesterol, assuming that you're not at normal ranges. Most Americans aren't, because they're sitting on the couch, eating Doritos, eating their pizza, and watching the football game, and watching Megyn Kelly. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. I also have a very high-quality multivitamin, easy to digest. You need multivitamins every day to have the concentrations to be as cofactors to help for enzymatic activity. Minerals and vitamins bind to the actual enzyme and helps the conformational shape of that enzyme to work more efficiently. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the multivitamin that I offer as part of your anti-aging protocol. I wouldn't be surprised that Megan Kelly looks so good because she buys my products, but I don't know that for a fact. That's speculation. All right. Please go to my store and get the structural nano silver soaps. I have it in charcoal tea tree, in peppermint, and in oatmeal, spice, and lavender. So please go to my store and get the soaps, very high quality soaps, way better than, you know, the Dove and all this stuff, right? And you will see an improvement. Now, what I would like to hear is the Hill making the comparison between Tucker and Aaron, not Aaron Brown, it was Aaron Burnett. When I was playing Aaron earlier this video, I called her Aaron Brown, it's Aaron Burnett. Mistake.
When my son Brian died in a drunk driving accident, I put out a video about it, trying to stop young people from drinking and driving. And because of TikTok, I can reach millions of people around the world. If you save one person, that's one more person that can change the world too, right?
It's just too many commercials.
Oh my gosh.
There we go. So Aaron Burnett and
CNN is switching up its lineup. The network will be moving host Poppy Harlow and Phil Mattingly off of mornings. Casey Hunt will anchor from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. CNN News Central will air from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Jim Acosta will host in the 10 a.m. hour, and Pamela Brown will launch a new show at 11 a.m. according to Puck. This comes
now, why do you
CNN
think that
held
is?
again.
Because half of America is tired of their BS. The problem is that we got to get the other half of America to wake up.
Another journalist, Tucker Carlson, who recently went to Moscow, allegedly to interview Russian President Vladimir Putin. Here's CNN's Aaron Burnett.
A massive shakeup in Kyiv coming as Putin is trying to court the MAGA GOP in the United States. In fact, one of the leaders of the MAGA GOP is in Moscow tonight. It's the man you see here.
Notice how that she frames that? Oh, if you're a Trump supporter, if you're part of MAGA, you must be a Russian spy.
Tucker Carlson, possibly there in Moscow to interview Putin. Definitely there as a Putin supporting celebrity. Just listen to how Russian state media is breathlessly celebrating his visit.
Independent journalist Tucker Carlson has flown to Russia from the U.S. via Turkey to Vnukovo Airport. He saw Spartacus Ballet at the Bolshoi Theater, had lunch at a nice restaurant, went for a ride around town, rode the subway. He charged his smartphone via a USB port and connected to a fast and free Wi-Fi internet.
You know how I sometimes joke that Kamala Harris's speeches sound like she's just pointing out things around the room? That's what that reads sounded like. He plugged in his USB cord. He ran the subway. Sorry, but in addition to this whole staff mix-up at CNN staffers behind the scenes have raised concerns internally about CNN's seeming pro-Israel bias. For The Guardian, CNN staff say network's pro-Israel slant amounts to journalistic malpractice. We covered that a little bit earlier this week. It is interesting to see that all does not seem well in the state of CNN. What do you make of the new lineup for the mornings?
I don't know, seems fine. It seems like they just keep moving the same people to different time slots and then being surprised that it's not working. That it's not, this is all the regular, normal CNN people. It's not actually some astonishing shakeup. It's just a signal that whatever they're doing is not bringing in the ratings that they want. They've been in a, perpetual rating slump since the exit of Trump from the national spotlight, since the kind of COVID bump that everybody in the media got went away, and they're struggling to find people who bring in audiences. I don't really have anything against any of the people mentioned in this conversation. I've seen perfectly adequate commentary.
And I would
from
say
all of
that
them,
in the last 4 years, independent journalists and these podcasters are taking away viewership. And over that 4 years, they've been accreting more followers and moving away from mainstream. But mainstream is still a major force of public opinion, or for public opinion, I should say.
But yeah, what they're doing is not working, and then I don't see that they have any plan to fix it, because these are minor changes. Now you're going to go to this time slot. Now you're going to go to this time slot. It's annoying. I can tell you that from a hosting perspective when you get shuffled to different time slots. But so it's not a vote of confidence when it happens. But I don't think they've really figured out their problems, and I don't think complaining that Tucker Carlson again. You can. We talked about this yesterday. When they do the interview, if it's bad, if it's sycophantic, if it just valorizes Putin and doesn't ask him any serious, tough questions about his authoritarian hold over Russia or his unjustified attack on Ukraine, then fine, criticize it. That's totally, but the idea that he would go there and do it, that criticism makes no sense, because CNN itself has done interviews with even more controversial figures than Vladimir Putin, more vile and evil people, and that's a part of journalism. It's never considered to be a bad thing in the past. Again, if you don't like it, you can criticize it. We'll talk about it. We'll criticize it. I'm not criticizing every interview Tucker's ever done, but they're really railing against the fact, almost from a jealous. It does come across a little desperate and jealous that they can't get these kind of interviews.
And hypocritical, as you just alluded to, and Glenn Greenwald pointed out a few hours ago online. In 1997, CNN interviewed Osama bin Laden about why he declared jihad against the United States. That's what journalists have always done. And now Aaron Burnett insinuates Tucker Carlson is a traitor for interviewing Putin. Now, look, again, depending on how the interview goes, it could seem like a softball interview, which then does raise these questions about why and whether Tucker Carlson is trying to kind of advance Putin's agenda, or whatever you want to call it. But until then, this does seem really premature, and it does seem to raise what's been an ongoing criticism we've had of CNN and legacy media, which is that they seem to think that the magic bullet to cure their ratings woes has to do with, we'll move this person to a new slot, we'll get this more kind of famous legacy person in this role. We'll talk more about Donald Trump in a critical way. Let's get more of these never Trump Republicans on the air. And it really feels like that's the exact opposite of what people want, because what they're presenting to the public is a fiction of political diversity.
Yes.
If everyone on the show is a never Trump Republican, if a never Trump Republican is the star, one of the stars of MSNBC in Joe Scarborough, or people who were formerly George Bush II's spokeswomen having these prime positions on the show. When you have the President of the United States looking to a never Trump Republican for political advice, as was reported earlier this week, that he loves to watch Morning Joe and Joe Scarborough. At the end of the day, I think that's a real representation of how there really is just one uniparty, and it is never Trump establishment folks trying to figure out how to wrest attention from a growing number of disaffected voters who are looking elsewhere for political content and elsewhere for political parties that actually meet their political interests.
Because that it attaches, or it's related to their problem, their failure to draw an audience, because they keep returning to the same well for intellectual diversity, but it's actually people who don't disagree with the rest of the kind of liberal progressive hosts, especially on the issues they most commonly cover, which is the Trump administration and the policies going on.
They're like star belly speeches. They're like, half of them have stars in their bellies, half of them don't. They're otherwise identical, and they're making so much hay.
And what do they say at the end of that book? You can't teach a speech. That's a good one.
I think that's what's happening.
I was gonna mention a minute ago, it was my views about
interviewing or platforming controversial speakers were formed very early on when I was at the University of Michigan. It was at the same time that Columbia University's President Lee Bollinger brought the president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad at the time, came to Columbia to speak. And it ended up being, Bollinger had previously been the president of the University of Michigan, so it ended up getting discussed on campus a lot. It was discussed in classrooms, discussed in the campus paper op-ed pages, which is where I worked. And a lot of Republicans were very mad and offended by it. John McCain, who was the presidential nominee at the time for the Republicans, I think, denounced it. But then when Ahmadinejad spoke on campus and then he was interviewed by Lee Bollinger, and he ended up looking pretty ridiculous in several instances. The gay marriage debate was going on, so he was asked about gay marriage, so there's no gay people in Iran, and the whole audience laughed at him. And it seemed like it was like this was not a harmful thing that happened. This was probably a good and educational thing for everyone involved. And the idea that Republicans who at the times were, I was thinking, even from like a more hawkish Republican standpoint, it isn't necessarily bad to do this because now you have liberal pro-gay marriage students seeing how kind of ridiculous and backward this foreign adversary is on this issue. It seemed worthwhile having these conversations. So I've always been for platforming the person, doing the interviews, letting them talk, letting them speak, as you should actually interrogate them. But it's not harmful to do that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching this interview at the end of the day. Let us know what questions you would ask if you were in Tucker Carlson's position in the comment.
It's going to be a big show, that's for sure. And I'll cover it, and I give you my 2 cents because I'm a New Yorker and I, have opinions. But before we close out, I want to play I want to play a video from this individual. His name is Cash Jordan, and he talks about things that are going on in New York. And I think it's important to get a perspective on how the city is being destroyed by liberal policy. And he does mini shows about immigration, about taxation, about public services going down because there's the budget shortfalls and all this. So this is talking about companies are being forced out of New York and why.
Happy note for workers at some of the country's largest tech companies, with more of layoffs just announced. ABC's Alexis Christopherson.
And having massive offices in America's most expensive city probably isn't helping things.
Google cutting hundreds of jobs in its engineering, product, and hardware divisions.
This week alone, about a dozen major companies announced job cuts, including Amazon and Google's parent Alphabet.
There is now over 100 million square feet of empty office space or leasable space in Manhattan. That is equal to 40 Empire State Buildings of vacant space now.
The big tech companies announcing they will be eliminating more than 50,000 jobs worldwide.
Some of those companies hired 50 and 75,000 people in the last 2 years.
So companies are laying people off all over the country, not just in New York. And some of these companies have expensive offices here in New York that they're either closing or leaving altogether. And companies like Google that are saying they're not making any big moves right now, that's for sure. But they're not expanding. And the fact that companies like this are letting people go and some of them are downsizing, that's bad news, not just for the country, but especially for New York. Even though New York City might actually be part of the problem. Facebook is leasing over 1 million square feet of space in Midtown. That's the old post office, and they're in there right now. But it's costing them a lot of money. And in order to understand what these layoffs mean for New York City, it's first important to understand that New York is probably the worst place you can have an office, because this is the most expensive office space in the whole country. And in a world of remote work, it doesn't make sense to have a massive office where people can work from their company-issued laptop, which is why right now the city has almost 100 million square feet of empty office space.
And not just that. It's not just the office space issue that's going on in New York. And, the vacancy rates are really, really problematic. It's just that the city's crime is terrible. And, what New York used to be is radically changing. It's starting, and you know, I think it's a big part of it is socialistic policies have destroyed the city. And there is a changing, there's a, you know, changing dynamic in labor because of technology now. And we have just started seeing just the iceberg of the structural changes of unemployment due to AI. We're just starting, but it's going to get a lot worse, especially when AI is integrated in a robot. Big problem, big problem. And so what's going to happen is these commercial spaces are going to be eventually converted to residential. But if the citizens don't have a job, how do they pay for their condo or their apartment? You can't decouple labor and capital. Can't. It doesn't work. It destroys the economy, destroys the middle class in the long term. All right? If you decouple capital and labor, and artificial intelligence does that. Come on.
This would lower their prices. But for some reason, that's not what's happening. And even as office vacancies pile up and companies downsize and move out, the city seems perfectly content with just allowing this to happen. But why?
I'm always on the go, so if it's not on my phone, I'm not using it. The Capital One mobile app makes my life so much easier. The fact that I can
Here's a great example of how expensive office space is. Look, you got this gorgeous, brand new office over here, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work going on inside. But look, right next to it, there's a little section of commercial space that has been boxed off and walled off. This little box right here could have been part of their store, but they didn't want it. Look, you can see the little fake wall back there. And literally on the other side of this divider is their space. But before we get into why New York City loves having empty office space that nobody can afford to rent, it's important to understand that tech companies going through a layoff procedure, that's not just because of a tough economy that's leading to empty storefronts, even in New York City's pricey, exclusive Chelsea market. In fact, many experts say that the tech layoffs we're witnessing were going to happen no matter what. And that's because of every employee's favorite word, productivity.
Economic experts say big tech is now reducing its workforce that became inflated, and now they have to cut back.
So whether or not this was planned or going to happen,
they overhired, right? But not just that, there's the implementation of artificial intelligence. And, you know, the big drop off of labor hasn't hit yet. And it will, trust me, it will. Artificial intelligence is going to give companies in the short run the ability to sell product and services at a lower cost. You're up to the point where there's too many people that get laid off and no one's buying products and services. But in the short run, there's going to be companies that are going to be benefiting from it, and Wall Street will reward them for this productivity gain. But in the long run, it's the decoupling of labor and capital and the destruction of the middle class.
Naturally. Anyways, it's going to have a big effect on New York City, but to understand why, you've got to realize that in 2020, these tech companies went on a massive hiring spree, which makes sense. The world started using tech more than ever that year. And at the time, there was very low inflation, which allowed companies to spend more money on speculative hiring. But here we are a few years later, and as it turns out, tech companies overhired by a lot, completely overestimating the number of people they were actually going to need to hold on to as the world went through some changes, which is why they're now downsizing, slimming down, and closing offices they built up here in New York City. In fact, Mark Zuckerberg called last year the year of efficiency, which I guess is a nice way of saying that they let a lot of people go. And the reason companies achieve productivity when they lay people off is because now the same amount of work has to get done by fewer people. And since employees love extra work and seeing their colleagues get fired, articles like this really shouldn't be surprising. But there's actually one massive driver of productivity that nobody saw coming: artificial stupidity. I mean, artificial intelligence, artificial stupidity. I think we already have that one. But from the middle of last year up until about now, AI has allowed companies to be way more productive and let larger and larger amounts of people go. And guess who companies are blaming for these recent layoffs? They're saying the computer made us do it. But contrary to what most of us think about AI, it can do way more than write college entrance essays, breakup texts, or inspirational quotes you then post to LinkedIn. Google, Microsoft, these guys are already using AI to do all kinds of stuff. Search, image generation, text generation, and if AI...
I have predicted this when I wrote my book, Artificial Intelligence. Now, the reason why I wrote my book on artificial intelligence was because I was doing some research that was after my Ph.D., because I have a Ph.D. in finance, and it was algorithmic trading, right, and machine learning. And that some of that post PhD research was in topographical finance and how to do predictive analysis using three-dimensional structures of the market, of the financial market. And the other part of it was how to train an AI, or it was narrow AI, to be able to train the AI to trade. And at times the trading AI would become a short trader, and at times a long trader. You know, they would either buy the market or they would short the market. And it was using kind of fuzzy logic with something in mathematics called fuzzy logic, and also behavioral finance. There was a behavioral finance algorithm that was tied to this machine learning that I was doing. And so I decided to write a book, and I was doing some conferences and talking about the worries that I had with Bitcoin and artificial intelligence and virtual reality. At that time, I wasn't talking about augmented reality at all. So I have always saw back in around 2016 that virtual reality and this digital currency, digital dollar is what I called it at the time, was going to be problematic with these algorithms that are going to be growing. So there was these conferences that I went to in California. Some of them were in LA. And there were, you know, the Bitcoin crowd, you know, they were trying to push Bitcoin back in 2016, right? And, you know, I kept on saying, yes, Bitcoin may be, it's not tracked, but it has metadata. And all you got to do is create a digital currency that has metadata to track. And now you have a surveillance technology against the citizen. So it's better not to have the technology, so you maintain your civil liberties. And everyone that was promoting Bitcoin at the time, you know, thought they would be able to get away from the Federal Reserve. You can't get away from the Federal Reserve. A war would happen before that. All right. So it ends up that it's now, Bitcoin is now a commodity, a virtual commodity being traded in the ETF market. All right. Now, and we've already heard about how the Federal Reserve is going to move towards a digital currency, right? A digital dollar that's meta-tagged, all right? That's surveilled, all right? So everything I was saying in 2016 came to fruition. Now, how does that dovetail into the artificial intelligence and the VR? Well, you have Apple that just released their VR AR unit, right? And there's already a plugin for ChatGPT for it. All right, so now you're going to be able to search very quickly, all right, using artificial intelligence. All right, so it's just a souped up search engine. Okay, but you can also generate art, and text through the generative AI part of ChatGPT. All right, so now you're building content that the AI is making that a writer would do, or an artist would do, or a photographer would do. So you don't really need a photographer anymore, and you don't need an artist anymore. You don't even need a marketing department anymore, or at least a very, very stripped down marketing department. So if you had a larger company, let's say it's doing $100 million, and you, let's say, had a marketing department of 6 people, it's to the point where you may only need 1 person in the department. Now you start to see the problem, where the decoupling of labor and capital. Where are these other 5 people going to get their job? Because all the marketing departments are laying people off. So only 20% of the workforce remains. What happens to the other 80% of the workforce for the marketers? And so people would say, well, it's just marketing. So, you know, these other jobs like engineering or architectural design, you know what? You won't need as many architects through generative AI, because you create a generative AI plugin to, let's say, some sort of AutoCAD, and you're producing drawings and designs that are automated. Now, you're going to need an architect to kind of look over and maybe correct some things, but you won't need as many architects. Let me give you an example. In automotive pre-CAD CAM, pre-computer aided design and manufacturing, you would need thousands of draftsmen to design a car. Once computer aided design and computer aided manufacturing came on board, you didn't need thousands of draftsmen. You only need hundreds. So there was an efficiency. You still had people employed, and some of those draftsmen moved up the value chain at the company. Some of them didn't and changed jobs. But not everyone became a CAD CAM guy. Some of the draftsmen retired, depending on their age, depending on their skill sets. But when you're talking about something that is the pace of AI is to the point where the AI is going to be trained to do almost any job, especially when the AI engine is put into a robot. So I wrote a book about this in 2016, roughly 2016. I'm not sure if I published it in 2016 or if I published it later, but it's on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and you can purchase it also on Amazon. So it's Artificial Intelligence, the book that I wrote. It's an ebook, all right? And it talks about Kurzweil and this whole singularity, and he's a strong proponent of artificial intelligence and transhumanism. This Singularity Institute that he founded. And I discussed the different philosophical thoughts that some of these singularity types have, like Kurzweil and others. And then my thoughts on it. So you see this thesis, antithesis, and synthesis of the benefits and the drawbacks of artificial intelligence and transhumanism. And I come to the conclusion that humanism is going to be battling transhumanism. And that it's going, and both have an Achilles heel. The transhumanists, the ones that are adopting AI, are going to be able to think faster, move quicker. Their Achilles heel is energy. The humanists, they're more nimble. They're not as dependent on energy, but they're slower. All right? They're slower with their thinking. And if you're talking about exoskeleton type transhumanism, then humans are are going to be, their kinematics will be slower compared to, let's say, bionic woman and man transhumanists. All right. So there's going to be a battle between the humanists and the transhumanists. And this idea of going into monkism to be a humanist, where you're not a Luddite, you still have technology, you still use technology, but it's more measured. And you don't subscribe to the transhumanist movement, where you have devices on your body, you don't subscribe to, you know, the overuse of technology, and you move more back to making things, you know, not buying stuff, growing a garden, not buying as much from the grocery store. You know, some people would, you know, call this kind of like the off-grid movement. In a way it is, but in a way you can still be part of society and be a humanist. But eventually there's going to be this battle between humanists and transhumanists, and it's going to be dystopic. And probably some sort of electromagnetic pulse is going to be needed by the humanists to destroy the transhumanists. So you have to almost, to save humanity, you have to destroy the electrical grid. To save humanity, you have to go back to a pre-electrical age. Now, I'm sure that's years away, but this is what I was discussing back in 2016. And I'll tell you, it's not too far off. It's going to be very similar to kind of like this dystopic post-drone war Star Wars type stuff. It's not going to be like Star Trek, where everything's hunky-dory and it's utopic. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. And if the transhumanists win, and there's a huge implementation of artificial intelligence, you will not need as many humans. And so there's going to need to be a depopulation agenda. So you either stand up and be a humanist and fight, or you succumb to the transhumanists and be part of the depopulation agenda. It's really simple.
Right. It can also write code and improve things that we use every single day. Porcelain is what they make toilets out of. That's some bragging rights right there. And you know this little guy right here, Bing? Why is there so much empty office space in New York City? Look at that. It just gave me 3 paragraphs. And what's great about this is at the bottom, it has the sources that it used to generate this answer, so you can check it and see if it's intelligent or not. But it's pretty ironic when you think about the fact that big tech is leading the way with the AI charge, but AI is also going to replace a whole bunch of jobs in big tech, which is going to save them money on New York City office space that they don't need anymore, and employees who they no longer have to pay, sadly. But there's more to the story of big tech shedding jobs, specifically here in New York, because every single company has some sort of presence here, but as they decrease their physical presence...
And think about what was happening in inner cities like Detroit when there was the white flight that took place in the 60s. You had companies moving to the suburbs because of the race riots, and then the inner city started to collapse. Now, some cities rebooted, like New York in the 80s with Giuliani. And there was a reboot in Chicago. But Detroit rebooted much, much later. All right. How's that any different with the white flight of the companies leaving the inner city? And then all of a sudden you have this major structural disruption from AI and not needing as many people employed. It's the same thing. Their inner cities are going to implode. They're going to lose their tax revenue. Their services are going to get worse. More crime is going to happen. And there's going to be lawlessness.
Experts say more and more folks will realize that the city itself is the reason this is happening.
Hyundai Tucson versus Nissan Rogue. Look what Tucson has and what Rogue doesn't.
Did you know that Twitter has a New York City headquarters, which they aren't using? Actually, this would save them money because their actual office is in this building right here, and they're closing it. And after they leave the city, they'll be joining the ranks of Kickstarter and Yelp, who have done the exact same thing. And Twitter's also laying people off. And that's because Elon Musk said the company was losing $4 million a day, which meant that the job losses were totally unavoidable. Plus, they've got problems with some of their legal filings here in the state. Meta, aka Facebook, they're in a similar position. Government paperwork, making it tough for them. Maybe they should use AI to do the paperwork, and then they wouldn't have such problems. But Meta actually has one of the most impressive offices anywhere in the city because it's next to, or inside rather, the old post office building, which is still technically a post office, but it's also a modernized train station. But their expansion and investment in this building started back in 2019. Through the glass roof, you can actually see some of the offices up there. They don't actually need all the space that they have access to. And since they drastically overbuilt, reducing their New York City office presence is a big cost saver for them. And 2 years ago, they actually decided to bail on some office space they'd leased nearby this new headquarters. And believe it or not, they're actually trying to sublease some of the office space they can't weasel out of. Subleasing is when you lease the space that you've leased to somebody else, even though you're not the landlord. But Facebook's not the only company that overestimated how much they needed. Amazon's in a similar boat, and their recent decision to proceed with layoffs, that also has to do with shifting business priorities. And as far as Google, things aren't much different on their end either. Cutting costs, letting people go, new priorities. I want to do new things. It's not you, it's me. And Microsoft is on a similar mission. They're citing future revenue growth as a problem. And they're also trying to get out of 42,000 square feet of office space they no longer need. But part of the reason this is bad for the city is that because when tech companies decide to do layoffs,
I think if you like put on the philosophical hat, and I think we need more people that do this, you know, be a thinker. There's a gluttony that has taken place in America where we have overdone it. We have overbuilt, we have overconsumed, gotten to the point, as a microcosm, just look at the cost of a ticket to go to the Super Bowl nowadays. I remember as a kid, the Super Bowl, you know, was something to watch, but it wasn't so expensive. It was affordable. Now these games are starting to be for the wealthy, up to the point where almost the uber wealthy, if you want a suite, you know, for the game. That's just not right. That's just not right. There's something wrong. The system is crashing. And probably this is something very similar to what was happening in Rome, where they were so focused on the bread and circus, so focused on, you know, that they were so focused on activities that give you enjoyment, that you weren't focused on the cracks in the system, politically, financially, and eventually the empire fell and fractured, right? And turned into ruins and led into a dark age. Is America ending? Is America starting to crack? How can someone afford, the average person afford Super Bowl tickets? And then take it one step further with the whole national security state, which you didn't have as prevalent as, let's say, during the Roman Empire. But this overreaching of the national security state by the CIA. It almost seems as though these famous people, either in football or in music, seem to be promoting an agenda, a government agenda. You know, with Taylor Swift and her new boyfriend from the Chiefs as a football player. You know, promoting certain type of health. I don't want to say the word, but, you know, go and do certain things to your arm. All right. Or Taylor Swift telling you how to vote. I mean, George Clooney is still eating crow when he told, you know, the press that Trump wasn't going to be president of the United States. So, you know, There's cracks in the system. And it's crazy to think that they can just keep on elevating these costs of entertainment and subscriptions and food costs and say that you're going to have a vibrant society. It's going to crash. Now there was a news article, I believe it was on Bloomberg. And unfortunately, you know, most people don't subscribe to Bloomberg's website. So it's behind a paywall. So, you know, many people may not have read the article if it was on Bloomberg. I think it was on Bloomberg. And it's talking about how hash browns from McDonald's are too expensive for certain people to buy. And so there's a decline in sales for McDonald's. You just can't keep raising the cost because the citizens' income isn't growing as fast especially, you know, the lower strata of society. But you have these CEOs that are collecting hundreds of millions of dollars in pay, being the CEO of, let's say, McDonald's or whatever. And they justify their existence by able to going to Wall Street and saying, well, you know, we can keep on passing the increases of inflation to the consumer. And so our revenues have gone up. And so Wall Street looks at that and says, wow, your revenues went up in absolute dollars. We're going to increase the value of your company by $10 a share. And now the shareholders are much richer because all the traders start bidding up the price. Meanwhile, the poor can't buy their hash browns at $3 a pop. It's a big problem. The system's going to crash.
They decide to change what they're doing. Companies that might have worked with them as maybe contractors or partners, they're then forced to go and do the exact same thing. So there's a big ripple effect when a big company makes a big move like this. Google doesn't make everything in-house. They need components, they need little parts here and there from different subcontractors. And some of these companies even outsource software projects that they don't feel like getting their hands dirty with. But in order to understand why companies leaving and downsizing and closing their offices could crush New York City financially and why the city doesn't really seem to care if that happens, we need to look at what companies' alternatives are if they don't want to rent a massive overpriced New York City.
Now, Cash Jordan, his videos, you know, are informative, but you know, but the thing is there's a bigger thing going on. It's not just New York. Just go to the grocery store in suburbia, pre-crisis and post-crisis of 2020. I'm willing to bet that you will see less items on the shelves. That means that you have less products in the society to be able to purchase. With, let's just say this, let's just make it simple, and that there were no population growth or death, you know, but there is population growth and there is death, right? But let's just make it simple, where the population hasn't changed, but there are less goods. That's inflationary. That's not deflationary. So not only are we increasing the number of dollars out there through these social programs, but we are reducing the number of goods in the society. So there is less goods, there are more dollars, so there's more dollars chasing less goods. That's inflationary. And when that is happening, it's going to cause a disruption. And it's going to start having a shock wave in regions like New York, in suburbia, in tech, in other services. Let's say, not even in tech. Just look at let's just say in the legal services. Do you need a paralegal anymore? The AI can do it. The number of lawyers that you need are less. That's probably a good thing. But what are these lawyers are going to do? Because they're used to just chasing ambulances. It's a big problem.
Office, because it's also the reason why companies like Google and Amazon are hanging on and companies like Meta and Microsoft are shipping out.
Is that better? The finely crafted Volkswagen Taos. It's built just right. Get 1.9% APR financing for 48 months on a new 2024 Taos S4 Motion. Release one for $279 a month. Limited inventory available.
Too many commercials.
That's another thing with societies, is there's just too many commercials. So if you don't want to rent an overpriced office, you can do what Amazon did and buy this entire office. On top of that, owning New York real estate counts as an investment. And this investment of Amazon's opened about 8 months ago. This is the former Lord & Taylor building, and it became a landmark back in 2007. Location's great right by the ESB. Look how close this is. Right there. And it's 2 blocks from Bryant Park and the library right over here. And this beast of a building took years to renovate. That's probably Jeff's office right there. It's got 11 floors, 600,000 square feet, and 20 different elevators. You can still see the old Lord & Taylor logo way up there at the top, because it used to be a department store. And the building was built in 1924, so it's now
Think about
100 years.
that. Think about it. And we're probably going to see Macy's go under too in our lifetime. But you have Lord & Taylor's. It's that building is renovated for Amazon. There's a structural problem that's going on in the society, and they probably don't even need that space. There's probably a lot of fat in Amazon that can be trimmed.
But it's got some problems. And you see these lower level areas right here, these storefronts aren't being used. Think about it, this would be the window for some sort of commercial space. Door right here for people to get in. Here's another main style entrance right here in the corner. Look at that. All of those are closed except the main. And I'm pretty sure this is where people who work at Amazon can go in, which they don't do all that often. Also, there's a lot of vacant commercial space across the street, so we shouldn't be too hard on Amazon, because I'm sure whatever's in here is going to be nicer than the empty little building across the street as well. But did you know that Amazon paid $978 million for this back in 2020? And the 2,000 people who work here only show up 3 days a week. But on the plus side, they're saving money on rent. But on the negative, if New York's no longer a good fit, they can't leave. At least not as easily as a company that's leasing rather than owning. And that's what pretty much every other company that's cutting jobs is doing. Not only are they cutting jobs, but they're also cutting their office space. Amazon can't do that, which means they aren't contributing to what many people are calling New York City's commercial real estate catastrophe, which some people think could tank the city.
Things were getting better for a little while, or at least they look like they might, but that sort of fizzled out after September. There is now over 100 million square feet of empty office space or leasable space in Manhattan.
So New York City is littered with vacant office space. This is vacant space right here. And according to the New York Times, the number is 100.
It's a sign of a declining society. And we are seeing signs of a declining health of our society too. So go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and follow my anti-aging protocol and boost up your immune system. Get my structural nanosilver liquids, either the max 35 or the max 14. Take a teaspoon of it a day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. You gargle with it, you swish it in your mouth, and you swallow it. I have a probiotic that's in a capsule form and in a powdered form. Please go to my store and start using a probiotic. You need to get the proper gut biome for proper metabolism and proper gut health. I have ashwagandha. Get it to control your blood glucose levels, but also as part of the anti-aging protocol to bring down inflammation. Get the turmeric that I have. It is an antioxidant, but it also will bring down inflammation. Part of the anti-aging protocol. Vitamin C. Very important for your immune system. It's also an antioxidant. And it will help with your skin. Drink 64 ounces of filtered water and take collagen, which I also have on my store. Clarity Factor, help to reduce brain fog and get those dendritic connections active. So take Clarity Factor and you'll be able to focus at work, focus at school. And, you know, if you're taking it on a regular basis, it'll keep those neurons firing and you will have more mental acuity. Take C60. I have it in avocado or coconut oil. It's a very, very strong antioxidant. You need a strong antioxidant to be able to have healthier cells and healthier mitochondria. I have it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce bottle. So please go to my store and get the C60 as part of the anti-aging protocol. By reducing free radicals, you're going to boost up your ATP. Vitamin D3. It helps with gene expression, but it also helps with absorbing calcium. You need vitamin D3 on a regular basis. I take 10,000 units of this a day. I take 5,000 in the morning and 5,000 in the evening. Resveratrol, very important. It's an antioxidant, but it'll help to get rid of senescent cells. It's part of an anti-aging protocol. Get the resveratrol. I have partnered up with Rainbow Herbals, and we have great deodorants that are made from the Himalayas. It's made from essential oils, right? All natural, very high quality. We have it in citrus and in peppermint, tea tree, and lavender. Get a couple bars of the deodorants for males and females. But what's the beauty of the ingredients from the Himalayas for these deodorant bars? You're using it every day as a deodorant, but it'll help to detoxify your body. It's a dual purpose. It has no aluminum in it. It's way better than anything you're going to be buying over at the store, let's say the drugstore or your supermarket. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the deodorants that I offer. It will help with your health, and it is made from all natural ingredients from the Himalayas.
Million empty square feet. That's crazy. And New York City's office-related downfall started back in 2020, and by the end of 2023, 17% of all office space in the city was for lease. And here's why this could end up spelling absolute doom for New York City. All of these buildings are how New York City makes money, and the more these buildings are worth, the more money the city can get from the owners of these buildings by way of property taxes. But as office buildings go out of style and their value starts to drop, the city starts making less money. And that's because with all these empty spaces, nobody's using these buildings the way that they used to. And since nobody wants to use them, their value's a lot lower. Think about it. All this space is just sitting here empty. Nobody wants anything to do with it right now. Now, at some point that may change, but if it doesn't, experts are predicting the city could lose billions of dollars in tax revenue. And that's bad for 2 reasons. The first reason it's bad is because obviously the city now has less money to run itself. And the second reason that it's bad is because if the city tries to fix this problem, it's only going to create more problems for itself that it can't fix. If the city's taking in less in property taxes because office values generate less money for them, the city could cut its spending on things like fire, police, road maintenance, but then the quality of life here in New York is going to go down, people might move, and then there might be less people to go to these offices. And the other thing the city could do would be to raise taxes, but then people and businesses are going to leave as well. And that's basically like a massive catch-22 that the city's stuck between. The office market is in free fall, and there's really no way to correct that. At least not without angering the people that live here that you need to use those same offices. In fact, many residents say that they feel the streets are more dangerous. Trash and litter is definitely starting to pile up as the city continues cutting its budget, as it deals with a whole bunch of crises simultaneously. But the last thing the city wants is for the value of office space to drop. And believe it or not, landlords don't want that to happen either, because if that happens, who are they going to sell their building to? Also, it's been 4 years since 2020, and these big offices, they'll wait 10, 15 years in order to get somebody in there who signs a 20 or 30-year lease. And that's because unlike apartment leases, which are 1 to 3 years per tenant, banks, local gift shops, restaurants, they stick around for a long time. But it might end up that trying to keep office values high artificially ends up devaluing them in the long run.
Got remote work, and that's part of the reason, but now only about half of Manhattan's office workers are back in the office. That's basically unchanged since September.
Work from home. The single reason that companies may not be able to wait forever to see if they can get a big tenant who comes in and rents 10, 20, 30,000 square feet. It's probably never going to happen. may never happen. Or at least if it does happen, it won't be the same types of companies that were renting it before. And even companies like Amazon with their big, beautiful office that they're not walking away from, they're only in there 3 days a week. And before work from home became the name of the game, that was something that only upper level executives could do with their laptop. You had to go in and sit at your desk. And that's part of the reason why a lot of companies are also canceling planned expansions. Renting bigger spaces in a climate like this definitely doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And let's face it, these empty offices that you might be interested in, they'll still be here if you ever change your mind. But the real issue for New York could be that as worker productivity goes up because of things like AI and technological advancement, these offices drop even further because now there's even less of a need for them. Got a little company in here, but all of these lower floor suites are empty. Same thing in the building next door. Lights are on, but nobody's home. But believe it or not, there are some companies that are actually expanding. DoorDash, the delivery service company, they just signed 115,000 square feet of space. They're blowing up right now. And that's proof that as the things people want change, the need for an office might also change based on which industries are growing and which industries are contracting. Plus, DoorDash is also kind of like a tech company because they're using an app to provide a service that's traditionally been provided without one. But AI isn't yet going to replace the actual person that brings the package to your door, at least not this year. And believe it or not, there are some bright spots on the horizon for New York City's office market. So believe it or not, although vanishing tech jobs and AI and all this stuff could be a potential risk, New York City is a big place, and it's not dominated by a single industry like, say, San Francisco, which is pretty much all tech. In New York, you got everything. You got law firms, you got investment banks, you got insurance, you've got big salad, which basically means that other industries are probably going to fill in the cracks that are left behind by companies that decide to decrease their office space, like Facebook, for example. Who those companies are, what exactly it is they do, we don't necessarily know the answer to that yet. But recently, insurance companies and law firms have signed massive leases here in the city. In fact, a law firm this past year signed a lease for 760,000 square feet. That's a lot of lawsuits. Great business if you're in America. And what this essentially means is that New York City's diverse economy from a wide range of industries, that's going to be the thing that bails it out of this office market glut. And now the big question is, will big tech and empty offices hurt the city? Has it already hurt the city? Is the city recovering? Let me know what you think. I will see you in
It's the beginning of the spiral downward in America. Now, you can take my advice and be a humanist, or you can move towards the transhumanist movement. You're going to have to make a decision. All right? It's up to you. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the supplements that I offer to help improve your health and be a humanist and control your health. I have updated I have uploaded more lectures to my pulmonary module that people can purchase on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I just uploaded ventilation and perfusion and the carbon dioxide lectures. So people that want to learn about the pulmonary system, please go to my store, purchase the pulmonology module for $50. You get 22 PDF files, and you will get a video lecture accompanying those PDF files. That way you can learn about medicine, and you can reduce that power imbalance between your doctor and the patient, and you become a citizen scientist. You learn about medicine, you learn about science. And so you can be more discerning when you're listening to someone on YouTube, or when you are reading, you know, something from mainstream media, or watching something on CNN, and you're going to have an ability to be more discerning when you read these research articles that are being published. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and purchase the pulmonary module for $50. And I will be releasing other modules like infectious diseases and cardiology and many, many others. So please stay tuned for that. Now, if you haven't subscribed to all my channels, please do. I have 6 channels, 3 channels on YouTube, and Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. So please subscribe to all 6 channels. That way I get around the censorship, you get notified, and also follow me on GETTR and on X. Thank you for listening. All the links are in the description of this video, and have a nice day.